You're sitting in the driver's seat of your truck right now, staring at a cop shining a flashlight in your face. The flashing red and blue lights are bouncing off your rearview mirror, your heart is pounding out of your chest, and the officer just asked you to step out of the vehicle to blow into a plastic tube. You're terrified of what might happen if you say yes, but you're even more terrified of what happens if you say no. You're frantically wondering if refusing that test keeps you out of jail, or if it just makes everything 10 times worse. Take a breath. We're going to walk through exactly what happens when you refuse a breathalyzer, answering the biggest questions running through your head right now. This is education to help you understand how the system works, not legal advice for your specific case. Laws change wildly depending on where you're parked tonight, so you have to recognize how your local rules apply. The first question screaming in your head is simply, can the cops force you to blow into that machine? To answer that, we have to talk about something called implied consent. Implied consent means that by the simple act of driving on a public road, you've already invisibly agreed to take a chemical test if an officer has a good reason to believe you're driving drunk. You don't remember signing a paper, but the state tied that agreement directly to your plastic driver's license. They figure that driving is a privilege they grant you, not a guaranteed right you're born with. Because you accepted that little plastic card and took your truck out on public pavement, you already shook hands on a deal that says you'll submit to a breath test when a cop legitimately asks for one. So the immediate follow-up question is, what happens the second you say no to the officer? When you refuse, the officer doesn't just shrug and walk back to their cruiser. They'll almost certainly physically arrest you right there on the side of the road. They'll put you in handcuffs, put you in the back of a police car, and take you down to the station. This happens because driving under the influence is a criminal offense, which is simply a crime where you can be locked in a jail cell. The officer has already made up their mind that they think you're impaired, and refusing the test doesn't magically undo their decision to arrest you. Then, the paperwork starts flying. Refusing to blow triggers something called an administrative license suspension. Administrative means it comes directly from the government agency that prints your driver's license, completely separate from the criminal court system. It's a bureaucratic punishment for breaking that implied consent rule we just talked about. In a lot of states, the very second you refuse the breathalyzer, your license to drive is automatically revoked on the spot. The officer will likely grab your physical license right out of your wallet. This suspension usually hits you fast, and it hits you hard, often before you ever see the inside of a courtroom. Naturally, you're asking how long they can take your license away just for saying no. This is where the answer heavily depends on your zip code. A typical administrative suspension for a first-time refusal might be 6 months, or it might be a full year. Some states slam you with a longer suspension for refusing the test than they would if you had actually blown and failed it. The state lawmakers designed it that way to punish you for not holding up your end of that invisible implied consent deal. Now your brain is racing to the next obvious escape hatch. Can you just ask for a lawyer before you decide? This is a massive point of confusion for a lot of folks sitting in the back of a police car. In most situations, you absolutely have the right to talk to an attorney before you answer questions in a criminal investigation. But the courts across the country have decided that a breathalyzer on the side of the road is different. Because alcohol disappears from your blood naturally as time passes, the state considers it what they call evanescent evidence. That's just a fancy way of saying evidence that rapidly destroys itself minute by minute. Because of that ticking clock, you generally don't have the right to consult a lawyer before deciding to blow. The cop isn't going to let you sit in the back of the cruiser calling attorneys while your blood alcohol slowly goes down. They want a reading right then and there, and the law usually backs them up. Then you start thinking about the physical side of things. What if they tell you to blow, and you just don't blow hard enough? Police departments are very familiar with people trying to fake a bad lung capacity. If you give a few weak puffs into the tube, they'll mark it down as a refusal. What about the actual court process? Do you have any chance to fight an administrative suspension? You do, but the clock starts ticking the second the handcuffs click. When the officer takes your license, they hand you a sheet of paper that acts as a temporary driving permit. That paper tells you exactly how many days you'd to formally request an administrative hearing to fight the suspension. If you miss that tight deadline, your right to complain is gone forever, and the suspension automatically locks into place. A local lawyer often has to file that paperwork for you immediately to stop the clock. Now you're looking at the big picture. You're wondering, will I go to jail just for refusing the breathalyzer? The refusal itself is rarely a crime that carries its own jail time for a first offense, but the underlying arrest for operating under the influence absolutely can land you in a cell. Drunk driving charges carry potential jail sentences, massive fines, and mandatory classes. Refusing just adds another complicated layer of trouble to your already dangerous situation. What if this is your second time dealing with this mess? Are the penalties worse for a repeat refusal? They almost always are. States continually increase the punishment if you've prior drunk driving convictions on your record. A second refusal might mean a 2-year license suspension instead of 1. Some states even make a second refusal a completely separate misdemeanor crime. A misdemeanor is a lower-level crime where the maximum punishment is usually less than a year in a local county jail. Then there's the confusing reality of how insurance companies view this. How does a refusal affect your car insurance rates? Insurance companies look at a refusal as a massive red flag. To them, it strongly looks like you knew you were highly intoxicated and tried to hide it from the police. They'll likely label you a high-risk driver and cancel your policy entirely, or they'll hit you with premiums that cost more than your monthly truck payment. That financial pain can last for several years. A lot of people get mad and ask, isn't refusing a breathalyzer just using my right to stay silent? This is the most dangerous assumption people make late at night. The right to remain silent protects you from being forced to answer questions or confess to a crime. You absolutely don't have to answer when the cop asks where you were drinking or how much you had. But courts decided long ago that taking a breath test isn't the same as answering questions. Since driving is considered a privilege the state gives you, they get to attach conditions to it. One of those conditions is that you've to submit to physical testing if there's a good reason to believe you're impaired. At the end of the day, the biggest question is, when do I need to call a lawyer? The answer is immediately. The moment you are released from the police station, you need an experienced criminal defense attorney who handles these exact cases in your specific county. They know the local judges, they know if the breathalyzer machines were calibrated properly, and they know exactly how to request that administrative hearing before the deadline passes. Navigating the criminal court system while fighting the driving agency at the same time is nearly impossible to do alone. Facing the flashing lights is stressful enough without trying to decode legal jargon in the dark. You should never make life-altering decisions based solely on an internet video. Laws change constantly, and your local state rules might have specific quirks that completely shift the outcome. If you're dealing with this right now, get a licensed professional on the phone to look at your exact situation. Have you ever been stopped and asked to do a field sobriety test or blow into a tube, and how did you handle it? Drop your story in the comments below. Pass this video along to a buddy who might need a reality check before they make a bad decision on a Friday night. Make sure you subscribe to Scribble Law so you always know how the rulebook works before someone tries to use it against you.